Chapter 15, Economic and Politics. Economy and Society. The economy of a society is the system by which goods and services are produced, distributed, and consumed. The Industrial Revolution. We live in a society that is largely industrial, but that is quickly giving way to a new kind of socialization, the post industrial society. Whereas industrial societies are primarily organized around the production of goods, post industrial societies are organized around the provision of information and services. Service is a broad term meant to contrast a wide range of economic activities now common in the labor market. It includes banking and finance, retail sales, hotel and restaurant work, and healthcare. Comparing economic systems. Capitalism is an economic system based on the principles of market competition, private property, and the pursuit of a profit. Socialism is an economic institution characterized by state ownership and management of the basic industries, that is, the means of production or the property of the state, not of individuals. Communism is sometimes described as socialism and its purest form. In pure communism, industry is not the private property of owners.
The changing global economy. These are just concepts that were in chapter 2, like around it. So, as the global economy, it's a term used to refer to the fact that all dimensions of the economy now cross national borders. Multinational corporations, those that draw a large share of their revenues from foreign investments and conduct business across national borders. Economic restructuring, which refers to the contemporary transformations in the basic structure of work that are permanently altering the workplace. Deindustrialization, the transition from a predominantly goods producing economy to one based on the provision of services. Automation, the process by which human labor is replaced by machines. Contingent workers, those who do not hold regular jobs but whose employment is dependent on demand. And xenophobia, the fear and hatred of foreigners. Next, workplace and a more diverse workplace. Um, Economic events in one nation now can have major reverberations throughout the world. The global economy links the lives of millions of Americans to the experiences of other people throughout the world. In the global economy, the most developed countries control research and management, and assembly line work is performed in nations with less privileged positions in the global economy. Like how in cars, they usually have like different parts coming from different parts of the world, like Germany, America, and it's usually made in like less privileged like country. Within the United States, the development of a global economy has created anxieties about the movement of job overseas. Donald Trump's ascendancy to the presidency, he wooed working class voters by promising to bring their jobs back. Anxieties about losing jobs to foreign workers, including immigrants, produced xenophobia, which I said before was the fear and hatred of immigrants. A more diverse workplace. Today's workplace is older, includes more women, and is more racially and ethnic, sorry, I can't say it, diverse than ever before. White, non-Hispanic share of the labor market has fallen to 60% compared to 1994 and are expected to fall more. Asian and Hispanic workers and all women are expected to become an increased proportion of the labor market. The growth for young people aged 16 to 24 in the labor market is also predicted to decline. Next. Deindustrialization. Deindustrialization is most easily observed by looking at the decline in the number of jobs in the manufacturing sector of the U.S. economy since the World War II. Manufacturing accounts for only about 7% of the total labor force. The service sector employs the other 93%, including two segments: the actual deliveries of service, which includes banking and finance, computer operations, clerical work, and even education workers like no, sorry, that's the other one. It's food preparation, cleaning, or childcare. The transmission and processing of information, that's the people who are banking and finance and education workers like teachers. The industrialization has led to job placement displacement, the permanent loss of certain job types that occurs when employment patterns shift. Job displacement hits people in both rural and inner cities hard because emerging new industries tend to be located in suburban, not urban or rural areas. A phenomenon called spatial mismatch, causing poverty to be the highest in central and rural areas. Technological change. Increasing reliance on the rapid transmission of electronic data has produced electronic sweatshops where workers at computer terminals process thousands of transactions in a day. Automation eliminates many repetitive and tiresome tasks and makes rapid communication and access to information possible. The scaling may result when a job is automated or when a more complex job is divided into a sequence of easily performed units. With descaling, workers are paid less and have less control over their tasks. Descaling is a process whereby the level of skill required for performing certain jobs declines over time. Immigration. There are about 40 million foreign-born people in the United States, 44% that are citizens, and about 11 million undocumented illegal citizens. Immigrants constitute more than one-third of the labor force in fields such as building, cleaning, and maintenance, agriculture, meat, poultry, and fish production, and construction. 82% of immigrant households have at least one worker present. The stereotypes have grown throughout politics, particularly the Latino immigrants that they are illegal, poor, and desperate. But the facts show otherwise. In fact, the proportion of professionals and technicians among legal immigrants exceeds the proportion of professionals in the labor force as whole. Undocumented immigrants tend to have higher levels of education and occupational skills than the typical workers in their homeland. Immigrants include both the most educated and the least educated segments of the population. Some European nations have created guest worker programs to support the labor that immigrants provide. Guest worker programs allow immigrants to work in a nation for a limited period of time without fear of deportation. They must return to their nation of origin at the end of their time limit.
Social, social organization of the workplace. Work is not just an activity for which a person is paid, it is also the labor that is done without pay. Work is defined by sociologists as productive human activity that creates something of value, whether it's goods or services. Emotional labor is work specifically intended to produce a desired state of mind in a client and often involves putting on a false front before clients. Division of labor. The systematic interrelatedness of different tasks that develop in a complex society. So basically, this means different groups that engage in different profitable tasks. Race and gender segregation in the labor market mean that women of color are concentrated in occupations where most other workers are also women of color. Gender and race, class, and age all play a part in the division of labor. The class division of labor can be observed by looking at the work done by people with different educational backgrounds, because education is a fairly reliable indicator of class. The gender division of labor refers to the different work that women and men do in society. In certain societies that have a strong gender division of labor, they believe women jobs should be, for example, like secretarial work, and for men, they should work in, like, for example, construction. This contributes greatly to the propagation of inequality between women and men, especially because cultural expectations usually place more value, both social and economic, on men's work. The occupational system in the labor market. The labor market is comprised of two major segments, the primary labor market and the secondary labor market. This is known as the dual labor market. The primary labor market offers jobs with relatively high wages, benefits, stability, good working conditions, opportunities for promotion, job protection, and due process for workers. The secondary labor market is characterized by low wages, few benefits, high turnover, poor working conditions, little opportunity for advancement, no job protection, no retirement plan, and perhaps arbitrary treatment of workers. Jobs in the secondary labor market include waiting tables, non unionized assembly work, and domestic work. Occupational distribution describes the pattern by which workers are located in the labor force. Workers are dispersed throughout the occupational system in patterns that vary greatly by race, class, and gender, revealing certain occupational segregation on the basis of such characteristics. Unemployment and joblessness. The U.S. Department of Labor regularly reports the unemployment rate, which is defined as the percentage of those not working but officially defined as looking for work. A myth is the unemployment rate is a good measure of the nation's joblessness. The sociological perspective of this is unemployment is not the same as joblessness. The unemployment rate only counts those who are actively seeking work and excludes those who are working part time. Those who are discouraged, they have quit looking, and those who are underemployed, among others. The employment rate is one indicator of the state of the economy, but joblessness is typically higher. Sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is classified as a behavior. It is defined as unwelcome behavior of a sexual nature. For example, a man whistling at a woman when she walks by, or a woman looking a man up and down when he walks towards her. So I have a little video to explain, like an example. Gays and lesbians in the workplace. Increased willingness of lesbians and gay men to be open about their sexual identity resulted in more attention paid to their experience in the workplace. Surveys find a large majority of the US population endorse the general concepts that lesbians and gay men should have equal rights and job opportunities. But when asked about specific occupations, a significant proportion hold prejudice that gays should not be elementary school teachers, high school teachers, or clergy. Disability and work. Not too many years ago, people with disabilities were not thought of as a social group. Rather, disability was thought of as an individual frailty or perhaps a stigma. Sociologist Irving Zola was one of the first to suggest that people with disabilities will face issues similar to those of minority groups. Now, those with disabilities have the same legal protections afforded to other minority groups. The key to these rights are the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, that was adapted by Congress in 1990. Building on the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and earlier rehabilitation law, the Americans with Disabilities Act protect people with disabilities from discrimination in employment. Sociological theory of economic and work. Functionalists. Functionalists argue that society sorts people into occupations, with the more able sorted into prestigious occupations that pay more because they are more valuable, more functional for society. Conflict theory. Conflict theorists view the transformation taking place in the workplace as a result of inherent tensions in the social systems, tensions that arise from the power differences between groups vying for social and economic resources. Symbolic interaction theorem. Some symbolic interaction studies examine how new workers learn their roles and how workers' identities are shaped by the social interactions in the workplace. Functionalism's Functionalism interrupts work and the economy as a functional necessity for society.
So, power, politics, and government. So, the government, for example, is like, so they basically try and control like everybody's daily life. So, for example, you can't drive a car without license and registration, and you pay taxes according to the government rules, and you need a government issued license to marry. Even going to the beach may depend on the government having set aside certain land for public use. Um, the term state refers to an organized system of power and authority in society. The state is an abstract concept that includes the institutions that represent official power in society, including the government, the legal system, like laws, courts, and the prison system, the police, and the military. Types of authority. So there's traditional authority, charismatic authority, and rational and legal authority, which is kind of just how our leaders rule basically, how they not rule but how they govern. So traditional authority stems from long established patterns that give certain people or groups legitimate power in society, and charismatic authority is derived from the personal appeal of a leader for somebody such as Donald Trump, how they carry themselves. So, charismatic leaders are usually looked at to have special gifts, which is kind of like rally people together and try and believe what they're trying to say, basically. And somebody as Donald Trump was able to do that in the 2016 election, so he's looked at as a charismatic authority figure. And rational and legal authority stem from the rules and regulations typically written down as laws, procedures, or codes of conduct. This is the most common form of authority in the contemporary United States. And the pluralist model interprets power in society as derived from the representation of diverse interests of different groups in society. The pluralists see power as widely dispersed through the class system. Power elite theorists see political directly linked to upper class interests, and autonomous state theorists see the state as relatively independent of class interests. Some feminist theorists argue that all state institutions reflect men's interest. They see the state as fundamentally patri- patriarchal. It's organization embodying the fixed principle that men are more powerful than women. Feminist theories of the state conclude that despite the presence of few powerful women, the state is devoted primarily to men's interests. Both the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives, despite recent gains of women, are still 80% men. Groups that exercise state power, such as the police and military, are predominantly men.
Government are those institutions that represent the population and make rules that govern the society. The government of the United States is a democracy, therefore, it is based on the principle of representing all people through the right to vote. Not all people participate equally in the workings of government, like women, the poor, and the working class, and racial ethnic minorities. Thinking that we all have equal rights to vote among democratic nations, the United States has one of the lowest voter turnouts in the 2016 presidential election. The percentage of eligible voters who went to the polls was only 58% of the population. Political power has concentrated and inequality in government affairs. Women and minorities in government. In 2019, there was a record of 100 women serving in the House of Representatives out of 435. There were 25 women in the U.S. Senate out of 100. There is very little religious diversity. In the 115th Congress, only 30 identified as something other than Christian, like Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, and Muslim, and only 9 did not identify as Christian in the Senate. 1 was Buddhist, and there was 8 Jewish members. Researchers say the main reason for why women and racial ethnic minorities continue to be underrepresented in government because of prejudice within the presidency, and gender and racial prejudice play a role. Prejudice within the presidency, there was a time when Mitt Romney was Mormon, he is Mormon, and 18% of public wouldn't vote for him because of it. And Obama was accused by Trump, and then all of the Trump supporters believed that he wasn't born in the United States, even though he was born in Hawaii. Many people Social structure is also a major factor for women and people of color. Many people say they will vote for a woman if there were party nominated one, but a few actually doing bias of sexism. Women and minority candidates receive a great deal of political support from local groups, but at the national level, they do not fare as well. The military as a social institution. The military is a social institution whose function is to defend the nation against external and sometimes internal threats. The military arm of the state is among the most powerful and influential social institutions in almost all societies. In the United States, the military is the largest single employer. Approximately 2.4 million men and women serve in the U.S. military, 1.3 on active duty, and the rest in the reserves. It does not include that many hundreds of thousands who are employed in industries that support the military, like the Department of Defense. The military is one of the most hierarchical social institutions, and its hierarchy, it's extremely formalized. Like people who join the military, they have to wear, they all basically look alike because they all have to have their haircut, or women have to have their hair short, or it has to be in the bun. And they all dress like the newcomers. They all dress the same in the boots and the camouflage outfit. Military socialization places a high premium on conformity and eliminates individuality. All new recruits are issued identical uniforms and are allowed to retain very few of their personal possessions, like I was saying before. Most of the military is part of the institution of government, but there has also been privatization of the military, meaning that an increasing number of military functions have been paid on a contract basis to private for-profit employers. So basically, the military becomes like a business with people and cooperations, reaping profits on activities that once would have been not for profit. Race in the military. The greatest change in the military as a social institution is the representation of racial minority groups and women within the armed forces. African Americans have served in the military for almost as long as the U.S. armed forces have been in existence, except for the Marines, which desegregated in 1942. The armed forces were officially segregated until 1948, when President Harry Truman signed an executive order banning discrimination in the armed services. Currently, 18% of active military personnel are African American and 11% are Hispanic. Almost 3.6% are Asian Americans, 1.7% American Indian or Alaskan Native, 3.2% multiracial, and 1.1% Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. We know there was once a time where people pictured like a person in the army being a young white male, possibly wearing army green fatigue and carrying a weapon. But today's image is much diverse. Within the military today, there is a policy of equal pay for equal rank. African Americans as Latinos, however, are overrepresented in the lowest ranking support positions. Often they are excluded from the higher status technologically based positions. Most minorities remain in positions with little supervisory responsibilities, such as service and supply jobs. Women in military. The military academies did not open their enrollment in women until 1976. Since then, the armed services have profoundly changed their admission policies, and in 1996, the Supreme Court ruled that women cannot be excluded from state-supported military academies. Almost 204,000 women are on active duty in the United States. The Army has the highest proportion of women, followed by the Air Force, Navy, and Marines today. The involvement of women in the military has reached an all-time high in recent years. Women are 16% of enlisted personnel. For women in the military, the highly gendered organization of which they are part is also a challenge, including sexual harassment, sexual assault, unwanted, crude and offensive behavior, unwanted sexual attention, and sexual coercion. Sorry, I can't coercion. Sorry, I don't know why I can't say it right now. 1/3 of women in the military experience all of these, and 5% of women in the military experience some form of unwanted sexual contact, such as rape, unwanted sodomy, and indecent assault. Gays and lesbians in the military. Gays and lesbians have long served in military duty despite the policies that have been attempted to exclude them. The military has admitted that there always have been gays and lesbians in branches of U.S. Armed Forces, but homophobia is a pervasive part of military culture. The Obama administration ended the "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" policy, by which recruiting offers could not ask about sexual preference, which had to basically keep the LGBTQ community like hidden on the low, so there was not really so no one could say anything basically. And Trump he tried to make it a law to make it illegal for transgender people to basically serve in the army. Supporters of the ban on LGBTQ people in the military often use arguments similar to the arguments used before in 1948 to defend the racial segregation of fighting units. Military veterans. When veterans return home, they also have risks that result from social as well as physical needs for recovery and adaptation. Returning veterans have more complex forms of physical and emotional injury. Exposure to repeated blasts of IEDs has resulted in more traumatic brain injuries. Having an all-volunteer army has also produced more frequent redeployment, resulting in long-term exposure to war trauma as well as greater exposure to blasts and other forms of violence. Veterans have high rates of mental health disorders, a high risk of suicide, depression, and or drug and alcohol addiction. Veterans are more likely to have trouble adapting to their families, and it's hard for them to find jobs. That's why a lot of them are homeless right now. The situation for U.S. veterans shows how critical social institutions are in the lives of these men and women. That's all for the presentation.